It was supposed to be just another quiet Christmas night. The lights were on, the house was warm, and something outside kept moving in the dark. Something Daniel told himself was nothing, just the wind shifting through the pines. But then he heard it again, and this time, quiet as it was, it didn't sound like wind at all. Snow had been falling since mid-afternoon, the soft, unhurried kind that settles without announcement and covers everything in a hush so complete you can almost hear your own thoughts. Daniel Marsh had lived on the edge of Clearfield for 11 years, long enough to know the rhythms of a winter night out here, long enough to stop expecting surprises. His house sat at the end of a gravel road where the last of the streetlights gave up and the tree line took over. A modest place with a covered porch and a single strand of Christmas lights looped along the railing. He put them up every year, not because the holidays moved him much anymore, but because his late wife Carol had loved them. Old habits are like that. They outlast the reasons for them. He had been sitting in the armchair by the front window, a cup of coffee cooling on the side table, a television program murmuring in the background that he wasn't really watching. It was the kind of evening that asks nothing of you, still, unremarkable, and just a little too quiet for comfort. He was nearly asleep when he heard it the first time. A sound so faint he couldn't be sure it was real. He shifted in the chair and waited. The television filled the silence. He let it go. Then it came again. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even close to loud. But there was something in the texture of it, a thinness, a fragility, that caught somewhere in his chest and wouldn't let go. Not a bird, not the creak of a branch under the weight of snow. Something alive, something small, something that did not sound like it was doing well. Daniel set down the coffee, pulled on his boots without lacing them fully, and took the flashlight from the hook by the door. The cold hit him the moment he stepped outside, not the brisk cold of early winter, but the deep, bone-settling cold of a night that meant business. His breath clouded in front of him. The Christmas lights along the porch railing blinked their slow, patient rhythm, casting everything in alternating washes of red and gold and soft white. The snow on the steps was undisturbed. He swept the flashlight beam across the yard. Nothing. He was about to go back inside when he heard it again, directly below him, beneath the porch, near the lowest strand of lights where the glow barely reached the ground. He stepped down off the stairs and moved toward it slowly, not wanting to startle whatever was there. The flashlight found it, tucked against the base of the porch, almost pressed into the corner where the lattice met the frozen ground, was a kitten, not a barn cat, not someone's lost house pet. Even in that first moment, even before his mind fully processed what he was seeing, something about the face told him. The wide-set ears, the faint tufting already visible even on a face that small, the spotted pattern along the flank, barely distinguishable beneath the damp and the cold. A bobcat kitten, barely old enough to have eyes open by the look of it, curled into itself with the desperate, instinctive stillness of a small creature that has used up almost everything it had. Daniel crouched down. He didn't move quickly. He didn't speak. He just stayed low and looked. The flashlight held to the side so it wasn't blinding the animal directly. The kitten's sides were moving. He could see that much. Shallow, rapid breaths that told him the cold had already done real work on its tiny body. There was no mother nearby. He scanned the yard again, held the light along the tree line for a long moment. Nothing moved. The snow continued to fall in silence, indifferent and unhurried, filling in footprints and erasing trails as fast as they were made. He didn't know how long the kitten had been there. Long enough, clearly. Long enough that it didn't react when the flashlight found it. Long enough that it had stopped shivering in the way that means your body is still fighting and had settled into the deeper, more frightening stillness that comes after. Daniel stayed crouched in the snow for a moment that felt longer than it was. He was not a man who made fast decisions. He was a man who thought things through, who measured twice, who had spent years in a profession, surveying land, marking boundaries, that rewarded precision over impulse. But something about that small, motionless shape beneath the Christmas lights bypassed all of that entirely. He took off his jacket. He moved slowly, talking in a low, even tone the way he had once heard someone say you should around a frightened animal. Not words that mattered, just sound, just the assurance of a calm human presence. He slipped his hands under the kitten with the same careful deliberateness he would have used lifting something irreplaceable. It weighed almost nothing. Its fur was damp and cold against his palms. He carried it inside. Daniel hesitated at the threshold of his own kitchen, the kitten bundled in his jacket, the house suddenly feeling unfamiliar, Too loud, too bright, too much. He turned off the overhead light, left only the small lamp in the corner, lowered the television to nothing. The silence that replaced it felt intentional, like something the moment required. He set the jacket down on the kitchen table and opened it slowly, folding back each layer with the deliberateness of someone diffusing something. The kitten lay exactly as he had found it, curled, still, its spotted sides rising and falling in quick, shallow rhythms that made his chest tighten. It was breathing. That was what he kept coming back to. It was still breathing. He found a cardboard box in the hallway closet, the kind he'd never gotten around to unpacking after Carol passed. He lined it with an old flannel shirt, the softest thing within reach, and positioned it near the floor vent where the heat came up warm and steady. Then he transferred the kitten, both hands underneath, moving as though the air itself might startle it. It didn't react, didn't hiss, didn't pull away. It simply lay in the new warmth, eyes shut, too depleted for fear. Daniel sat down on the floor beside the box. He called a wildlife rehabilitator just before midnight, a woman named Ruth, whose number he found through 3 separate phone calls, each one redirecting him patiently to the next. She answered without irritation, asked the right questions, and gave him instructions in the calm, no-nonsense tone of someone who had guided panicked strangers through exactly this kind of night before. No feeding yet, warmth consistent, not direct, minimal handling, quiet, time. He wrote it all down, tore the page from the notepad and set it beside the box where he could see it. The hours that followed were the longest kind, the kind measured not in minutes but in the space between one breath and the next. Daniel stayed on the floor, back against the wall, watching the small rise and fall of the kitten's sides with the focused patience of a man who had spent his career reading land, finding what was stable, marking what might shift. He knew how to wait. He had just never had reason to apply it to something this fragile. Around 3 a.m. the trembling slowed. Not stopped, but slowed. The breathing deepened by degrees so incremental he almost missed it. He didn't allow himself to read too much into it. He simply noted it, the way he would note a change in elevation, carefully, without conclusion. Outside the snow continued to fall. The Christmas lights blinked on, blinked off, patient as ever. Daniel stayed where he was. No problem, here is. By morning the kitten was still alive. That alone felt like something. Daniel had not slept. Not really. He had dozed in the chair beside the box, waking every hour to check the small rise and fall of the kitten's chest, reassuring himself each time that the breathing was still there, still steady, still fighting. The house was quiet around him in the way that only early Christmas morning can be, a particular stillness, soft and unhurried, as though the world itself had agreed to slow down. He called a wildlife rehabilitator just after 7. A woman named Ruth, recommended by the county extension office, answered on the second ring. She had clearly taken calls like this before. Her voice was calm and practical, and she walked him through everything without making him feel foolish for not knowing. Keep the heat steady but not direct. No food yet. The digestive system of a compromised animal needs time before it can handle anything. Minimal handling, minimal noise. Let the body do what it knows how to do, she told him. Give it quiet. Give it time. Daniel followed every instruction. He darkened the room. He turned off the television. He moved around the house in socked feet, speaking to no one, keeping the world as small and still as he could manage. He checked the box every 30 minutes. The kitten's breathing slowly deepened. The rapid, shallow flutter of the night before began to even out into something more deliberate, more grounded. Color returned almost imperceptibly to the pale skin beneath the fur. Hours passed the way hours do when you are watching for something. Slowly, then all at once. And then, in the early afternoon, with pale winter light coming through the curtains and the Christmas lights still glowing softly on the porch outside, the kitten moved. Not much, a small shift of the head, a curl of one paw pulling inward. And then, eyes, just barely open, unfocused and glassy, blinking against even the dim light of the room, but open. Daniel didn't move. He sat completely still, forearms resting on his knees, watching. The kitten blinked again. Its nose worked slowly, reading the air, processing the warmth, the stillness, the presence of something large and quiet nearby. It did not pull away. Daniel exhaled, a long, slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, Something loosened in his chest, something he couldn't quite name and didn't try to. He had spent 3 years in this house learning how to be alone, convincing himself he had gotten good at it. Sitting there in the half-light of Christmas morning, watching a wild thing choose not to be afraid of him, he wasn't so sure anymore. Over the following days, the kitten grew stronger in the quiet, unhurried way that wild things heal when given what they need most: warmth, stillness, and the absence of fear. He began to move around the box on the second day. By the third, he was pulling himself up to the edge, peering over with wide, unblinking eyes at the room beyond, at the man who moved through it slowly and always spoke in a low, even voice before coming close. Daniel continued following Ruth's guidance. Small amounts of the right nutrition, no unnecessary handling, no loud sounds. He was careful, deliberate. The same qualities that had made him a good surveyor made him, it turned out, a decent caretaker of fragile things. He named him Frost. Not officially, Daniel was clear-eyed enough to know the kitten was not his to keep, but a creature that had survived what this one had deserved something to be called. Ruth had told him from the beginning that the goal was always return. A bobcat this young, this healthy, belonged in the wild. Daniel understood that. He held it without sentiment, the way you hold most true things, steadily, without flinching. But on the 5th evening something happened that he had not anticipated. He was sitting near the front window as the last light drained out of the sky, Frost asleep in the box nearby, when a shape at the tree line stopped him cold. Still, low, watching the house with the patient, unreadable focus that only a wild animal holds. A bobcat, full-grown, a female, by her size, compact and deliberate, her eyes catching the faint reflection of the Christmas lights still glowing on the porch. The mother. Daniel sat without moving for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rose. He crossed to the door, opened it gently, and stepped out onto the porch into the cold night air. He lifted Frost from the box and carried him to the edge of the steps, set him down carefully in the snow, then stepped back, all the way back to the door, and waited. The mother came forward one step at a time, reading every inch of the distance between them. She reached her kitten, touched her nose to his, held there. Then she looked up, directly at Daniel. It lasted only a few seconds, but in those seconds there was something in her gaze. Not gratitude exactly, something quieter than that. A recognition, an acknowledgement between two creatures who had for a brief window shared a stake in the same small life. Then she turned, lifted her kitten gently, and walked back into the trees. The snow held her prints for a little while. Then the wind came, and those two were gone. Daniel stood on the porch for a long time after, the Christmas lights blinking their slow, patient rhythm around.